Hi. Welcome to Someone Else's Movie, the original podcast where an actor, writer, director, or nebulous industry figure gives a little love to a movie they didn't make. I'm Norm Wilner, senior film writer for Now Magazine, and this is the other thing I do. My guest this week is best-selling author Linwood Barclay, who turned screenwriter last year when he adapted his novel Never Saw It Coming for director Gail Harvey, starring Emily Hampshire, Eric Roberts, Sean Benson, and Jennifer Podemsky. Now that the movie's available on VOD, it seemed like the perfect time to grab him for the show. Linwood chose Rear Window, Alfred Hitchcock's 1954 study in voyeurism, paranoia, and murder. James Stewart is L.B. Jeffries, a New York photographer confined to his sweltering apartment with a broken leg. Passing the time by watching his neighbors go about their business, Jeff becomes convinced that a man across the courtyard, Lars Thorwald, has killed his wife. But Jeff can't get anyone to believe the story. So he enlists the help of his physical therapist Stella, played by Thelma Ritter, and his fashion plate girlfriend Lisa, played by Grace Kelly, to help him crack the case. Things get complicated in the most interesting way, and you can totally see how watching this as a young person would maybe point one towards a career in elaborately structured mysteries. I don't know. I'm just guessing. This is someone else's movie.
We went to see it at TIFF 2 or 3 years ago. They did a showing of Rear Window, and they showed like an original print, like not a restored one. It was, and so it was looked rainy places, and it was
Was it pink? Did the color hold?
I'm no expert. I thought it looked pretty good.
Yeah. Oh, you can always. I mean, you don't need to be an expert. You'd know.
Yeah, and it was great to see it. That's fine. I always find that. I mean, I've probably seen it. I bet I've seen it 20 times, and I always see something new in it every time I see it.
Okay, well that's as good.
Like I sort of put it on this morning. We watched the first 10 minutes, and I noticed, why are there chickens on the roof of that house where the dancer lives?
Oh, that's right.
You're like, why are those? And the movie opens with the blinds being pulled up, and for the first time I thought, who's pulling up the blinds? Because when the camera pulls back, Jimmy Stewart's there alone and he's asleep.
But that's the only time we hear music too.
Just about. Because all the other music throughout the movie is this kind of music that's ambient, coming from the other apartments and so forth.
Yeah, the only non-diegetic is the first. Apparently, according to the IMDb, because I double checked it, the first 3 shots, which are the shots of the blinds coming up.
Yeah.
So that I think is Hitchcock setting the stage.
Yeah.
He's just introducing you to his world.
Yeah, because all the other music is you've got the composer you open the one window with the piano, and it's
occasional swing band hits. Yeah,
it's all kind of this ambient noise throughout. Yeah, it's just working brilliant. It really is.
It is. So this is as easy a way to slide into it as any. When did you first see it?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I don't know when I first saw Rear Window. I'm trying to remember when I first saw it, and I don't know if I saw it on TV when I was a kid or what, but I can remember the first time I ever saw The Birds, which was as a little kid. I saw it on TV and it just scared me to death.
Yeah.
And I don't even remember that my other, I go back and forth on what my favorite movie is, and if it's either Rear Window or it's Vertigo, and I go back and forth as to which is my favorite. Not just my 2 favorite Hitchcock movies, but my 2 favorite movies ever.
Okay.
And even Vertigo, not sure when I saw that the first time. But at some point, it just clicked, and I kept watching it over and over again. And I think once we sort of had, VHS tapes, or we had DVDs and stuff, that's when I ended up buying it, and I just watched it many more times.
It is one of those exemplary pieces of cinema. I hate saying that there's a best of anything in terms of Hitchcock's filmography, because Vertigo is the darkest, and you could argue that Frenzy is darker, but Vertigo is the one that people connect to and care about and remember. The sense in Rear Window that you're watching a storytelling exercise with 25 other storytelling exercises inside of it. I think it's his most complicated movie, even though it's all in one set. I mean, so was Rope, but again, that's what I mean.
And that's several takes just for that one too, or so it appears. But it's maybe it's the most complicated, but it's in a lot of ways it's the most restrictive, because it has this kind of single point of view that I think there's one shot in the whole movie that's not quite correct. It's shot as if you're down in the courtyard and you're looking up.
Yeah, towards the end it moves
but
a bit.
For the whole entire rest of the movie, you can't see anything more than Jimmy Stewart sees. And even as you sit and watch it, you're kind of turning your head, you're kind of shifting in your chair thinking, if I could just move over a little more, I could see into Raymond Burr's apartment. Thorwald, I can see what he's doing. But you can't. And I think that's the genius of it, is that you have this totally restricted POV.
Yeah.
I can't think of any other movie that's ever done anything quite like that.
It's the purest example of Hitchcock's own philosophy, which, if you, and I'm sure you've heard this a million times, if you show the bomb, people will be sweating and grinding their teeth.
Yeah.
If there's just an explosion.
There's no suspense if you don't know there's a bomb and it just goes off.
Right.
But there's a lot of suspense if you know there's a bomb and you don't know when it's going to go off. Yeah, that's the whole key. But this, and that's, which of course I think was, what is that, in The Secret Agent and Saboteur or whatever, it's the prime example of that. But it's different with Rear Window. There's just something about it, is that you have this, you're also, more than I think in any other of his movies, you're with him putting it together.
Yeah, that's it. It's, I try never to judge people for never having seen a movie before, because you can't. You can't
it's
see
fine.
everything, right?
I think judge the hell out of them.
But my wife turned out to have never seen Rear Window. Kate hadn't seen it.
I saw your tweet about that.
Yeah, and I was like, really? How did you miss it? And the answer is, there's a good reason, which is that those films, the 5 Hitchcock films for Universal owned, were out of circulation for a while.
Yeah.
And so when she was growing up in the UK, it wasn't on television. It wasn't
all's forgiven.
Yeah.
All is forgiven.
But I'd forgotten that Rear Window was part of the package. It was Rear Window, Vertigo, Rope, The Man Who Knew Too Much, and The Trouble with Harry.
Okay.
And that was when I first saw Rear Window, was when they brought them back around 1984, 1985.
Oh, okay.
There was sort of a roadshow.
Maybe that's around the time I saw it. I just don't know. But it's for the longest time I thought my all-time favorite movie was The Godfather, but as the years, or The Godfather 2.
Right. Sure.
But as years went on, I think, no, it's just so definitely that's got pushed down to spot 4 or 5 somewhere. But it's kind of somehow kind of imprinted itself onto me. Like it's, because I did a book a few years ago called Trust Your Eyes, which is in many ways an updated Rear Window. Mm-hmm. And it's about a guy who's obsessed with a kind of Google Street View kind of site, and he's traveling the world virtually by what he could see that Google cameras have captured, and he thinks he sees a murder in a window that could have happened 6 months ago or whatever, just a still.
So it's a combination of Rear Window and Blow Up, really.
A little bit, but there's a line that I deliberately put in that novel, which is where this person who thinks he's seen it, this woman says to him, well, tell me what you've seen and what you think it means.
Right.
Which, of course, is exactly what Grace Kelly finally says to Jimmy Stewart when she finally thinks he's on to something. And it's funny, it's only been over I think one person who I heard from through email said, who caught that? Who said, that's the line.
Yeah. Do you think it's because the film has receded in the conversation? The last 20 years have really been more about Psycho and Vertigo. As far as I can tell.
I guess there's some truth to that. I mean, Psycho is such an astonishing film. I mean, it's my third favorite. Maybe this is certainly my third favorite Hitchcock movie.
Okay.
But it's the one that really is also really daring. I even like that movie Hitchcock, the one where
Hopkins and Helen Mirren.
Yeah, I like that movie because it's interesting for what it tells you about the movie itself when they were making it.
That's true. Yeah,
that part is really, as well as that documentary about Psycho in the shower scene and so forth.
7852.
But the whole notion of let's kill off the leading lady in the first reel or whatever, first hour of the movie, which had to be just absolutely unthinkable. Like that's a rule. You just can't do that.
Yeah, I think this has come up on the podcast once or twice before in discussions that touch on Psycho. But amazingly enough, this is the only time. This is after. I think this is episode 210. You're the first person to bring a Hitchcock film on. No one's touched him, which I find absolutely fascinating.
Has talked about Hitchcock before? Nobody's picked a Hitchcock.
No one's picked a Hitchcock film before.
Really?
Yeah,
that's bizarre.
It is.
I was thinking, I was having a chat about the only other time I've seen a leading character wiped out in the first reel of whether I think is it Deep Blue Sea when the shark eats Samuel Jackson. I mean, and that moment is like, that didn't happen, But Psycho is like that. It's like, I mean, it's...
Well, Psycho doesn't have a central character. The focus shifts every 40 minutes. It's
I guess Norman is kind of the most central character in it.
But then in the final third, it shifts to Vera Miles, to Lyle.
Yeah, I know. And the thing is, all of that prelude of her taking the money and driving away and getting stopped by the cop in the desert and trading the car in for another car, and all that stuff, and there's all this time to spend on that. It doesn't have anything to do with what's going to come.
It's irrelevant. The only reason
it's like, well, like, what's the point of all that? But it all works.
It does. It's and that was the thing that came up, is that it's an experimental film disguised as a thriller, because using the skeleton of the narrative thriller, even though it doesn't actually use the skeleton because it's structurally completely different, everything about Psycho is telling you that it's a normal movie, and that's why it's so disturbing, because it won't behave.
Yeah.
It keeps moving and fishtailing and swerving.
The only part about Psycho I don't like is the long-winded epilogue.
Yeah.
It's like, move it along.
Yeah. I think that's there so people could basically compose themselves and leave the theater. And it's one of those, like, Hitchcock joked about that. He said he couldn't just end it with Norman grabbed and institutionalized. They needed something else.
Yeah.
To sort of let the air down, to let people breathe again. But it does. It's like 6 minutes long.
Oh, it's too long.
And now, of course, all the psychobabble has dated.
Yeah.
But Rear Window doesn't give you any. That was the thing that I realized watching it with Kate this time. It doesn't. It's all exposition. Everything about it is information.
And it's because you learn everything that Stewart learns.
Yeah.
That Jimmy Stewart learns as he learns.
But because he's there to formulate it with you, it doesn't feel like a lecture or pay attention to this, pay attention to that. The camera's doing that work for us. The other thing that surprised me this time was watching the re-release trailer afterwards that was included on the DVD, and it was from Paramount post-Psycho, and they were framing it as a nail-biting suspense thriller. Having watched the film again for the first time in a couple of years, it's remarkably calm. It's not, I mean, there's a simmering tension throughout, but it's so much more a romance picture and a relationship story.
It's not until it gets the most tense when Grace Kelly goes over there.
And that's 105 minutes in. I mean, it's a long
but
way through.
It's what it is. It's a puzzle movie, I guess, in a way. It's like you are with him trying to put it together. And this is kind of this cinematic jigsaw, and you're trying to put the pieces in until you can see the full picture of what it is.
Yeah, and Hitchcock being Hitchcock, it's probably going to end in something nefarious.
Yeah.
But there's still the possibility that he might be wrong, and that I think the film is engagingly made and intelligent enough that it would be fine if it was all a misunderstanding. We would have forgiven it because it would make sense, and because also the thing that really caught me this time is that L.B. Jeffries is kind of a dick.
Yeah, he is a bit, and he's so incredibly rude to Grace Kelly.
He is trying his best to break up with her.
He doesn't want to. He is a dick to her. Everything ultimately, and she in fact has to win him over by being, having this sort of daring aspect to her personality, and that's what wins him over. But she should just have easily been, I don't know, he should have come around anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, he is, and that part, that's some of the stuff that's maybe the only stuff in the movie that feels a little dated, is his attitude towards her. But I also like in the movie that it's especially for its time, it's very grown up. Like when his friend the cop looks at her peignoir or whatever, and he says, "Well, do you tell your landlord everything?" I just love that line. I love that line. It's so, and he just looks at you guys. He just gives him this look.
Yeah, it's weird that he keeps telling him to watch himself too, because the idea of them, they're already in a relationship. They're clearly dating. The idea that she's around shouldn't surprise anyone, and yet there is this weird moral backbone that Jeff has that no one else has in the film. Thelma Ritter is much more easygoing. Stella's fine with everything. She even offhandedly makes a joke about parts of people and then catches herself.
We were watching it this morning, and when she came on, we've been binge watching 80s episodes of Cheers. As soon as she came on, we thought that could be Carla's mother.
Yes,
she's going to be Carla's mother. It's just sort of
the no nonsense working character. The other thing, I keep saying the other thing. This movie has an incredibly deep bench. Even people who don't have names, we know very, very little about them. We know nothing more than Jeff knows, because he doesn't interact with his neighbors, which is some weird commentary on New York City, I guess. But it plays to the sort of prejudices of small town viewers at the time. It's very canny to have that aspect there, that they're all intricately linked, but they don't know each other, and that Jeff isn't the only one who's hostile. The owner of the dog gets her speech about how people are rotten, and Thorwald is allowed to operate because nobody really cares what he's doing. I mean, he's careful about his time, but he's also not that careful.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating to see all the pieces, all these moving parts of the story literally represented in this set that they built, this massive
There is that
functional
kind of
set.
thing where they create tension when they think that the woman's killed herself, and they lose focus on the main story that they're worried about with Thorwald and his wife, and then they think, oh my God, this woman is taking her own life. It's a brilliant movie.
Yeah, and the story of Miss Lonely Hearts is itself a self-contained.
Yeah.
She has a full arc. She thinks, she considers suicide. She's redeemed by the music.
And
that's
there's
playing.
the arc of the guy, the composer.
Yeah, which is another story that syncs up to it.
Yep.
It is. It's not that Jeff fixes anybody else. He really only solves Thorwald's case, but through him we become invested in all these other stories that he should be caring about just as much. And it is kind of fascinating that he is presented over and over again as the watcher, as this character who monitors people through his window because he's got nothing else to do. He's fixed in place. But he's also invented stories for them that aren't as interesting as their real lives, which slowly emerges over the course of the film.
And of course, his whole job is to be a watcher. He's a photographer. It's interesting how it's become Rear Window, even if it went through a period where people didn't see it, it's become a part of the popular culture. I mean, there's a whole Simpsons episode that's a takeoff on Rear Window.
Yeah,
and you know, so it's very much a part of, I think it's much more a part of the culture than even like a movie like Vertigo, even though there's been, you know, the Film Institute and others have voted its best movie ever made, which I think might be true, but it's not in the same way a part of of our culture in the way that Psycho or The Birds or Rear Window are.
Yeah, if you mention Vertigo, people, they get a feeling. It's about the obsession. It's about the darkness of it. But that's here too. There's an obsession with watching. It's not quite the same as remolding a woman into the spitting image of the dead woman you cared about. But
I know we're straying here, but I think that the last 5 to 8 minutes, the last 5 to 8 minutes of Vertigo are the best last few minutes of any movie ever made. No. That going up the staircase at the end is just, I watched it over and over again, that scene.
I'd be hard-pressed to argue. I don't know what else. I mean, and see, now I'm just distracting myself thinking about possibility. Jaws, I would say Jaws.
Jaws is pretty good, but I think this is better.
No dialogue, all confrontation.
It's funny. I tweeted that one day that the last 8 minutes of that were the best 8 minutes of any movie ever made. And Stephen King responded, "What about Maximum Overdrive?"
Well, I think
close.
I think the argument falls apart pretty quickly. That's the James Cameron recency effect argument. The thing that people go out of the theater thinking about is the only thing that, if you can wow them in your last reel, then it really doesn't matter what happened in the first 100 minutes because people will come out talking about the ending. Certainly, Hitchcock did that pretty often. But Hitchcock's also much more, and I was trying to figure out this time if it was because of the period that he was working in, but I don't think it is. He was much more restrained than a lot of the thriller payoffs than we have come to expect, but also of the time. You know, pulps film noir and pulp films of the 40s and 50s would end with characters standing collected over corpses.
No.
Hitchcock didn't really do that. He left stuff hanging and let you figure it out, and you know, you don't see things. You are left to imagine what happens.
And I think that's really very effective. And I think, and again, never more so than in Rear Window, because we never see the murder. We've never seen it. We don't see the dismemberment. We don't see the getting rid of the body. All we see are the peripherals of that event and put it together. But we can imagine it. And Thelma Ritter helps us.
We're sort of encouraged to with her. Yeah. She is constantly pointing out how grisly something would be and how horrible something would be. And doing it, again, in the most matter-of-fact way. I don't think she's speaking from experience, but she certainly understands how difficult it would be to wash a bathroom wall down.
Oh, yeah.
Just the way she puts that out there. It's just, well, yeah, it would be. And that's a performance that supports the reality of the film. It builds our understanding of the difficulties involved.
Well, she's also very helpful it's funny when you start writing things like I have to, for whether it's a book or other stuff. Mm-hmm. It's this way of doing backstory so you understand. when she gives some dialogue about, she happens to say in conversation, well, in the 2 weeks I've been treating you here for such and such. Well, nobody says that, you know what I mean? But she gives us backstory.
Yeah.
She's what my editors call an info dump.
Right. Sure.
And I'll have some sort of, somebody walks in the door and says, gosh, it's so nice to see you. 3 years since I saw you in Poland.
Right.
Who says that?
Yeah.
And
Larry,
so
I'm your brother. I mean, how many times do you hear a variation of that?
That's right. I'm your brother. How many times do I have to tell you this?
Yeah. I'm your brother and I love you, which is the other thing that I've grown tired of. That and the phrase, you said so yourself, which now shows up in every single piece of television and film.
You said so yourself?
You said so yourself. It's always dropped in the second or third act to push
I always thought the line we always hear was, that went well.
Sure, that's a punchline.
That's a punchline.
Acceptable.
That's right.
And it's not serviceable the way, or it is a work of.
But that is kind of what she does in a way. I mean, she's very helpful in the plot later because with when Grace Kelly goes over and so forth, but she is there to kind of give you backstory.
Yeah, and the film relies on so many things that we simply don't have anymore or don't have to worry about. Just the idea that there's no phone. I'll flash something, I'll flash my flashbulb. I'll fire a flashbulb in order to get your attention, as opposed to every other scene in the film as well. If you had a cell phone, or the moment where is it Stella who calls or Lisa who calls him at one point and says, "I couldn't find anything," and I thought, oh, she must have gone to a payphone.
Yeah,
she can't be calling from inside the apartment. She's already left. Where would you? And that's the thing that no one would have blinked at in 1954, but now it takes me out of the film because
I know, but I don't. Those things don't bother me when I watch it. I think it's, I think that it was a simpler time. It was a nicer. It was, the technology has afforded or has eliminated so much of storytelling. Imagine if Philip Marlowe had the internet,
right,
the books would have been 12 pages.
Sure.
He didn't have to knock on doors. He'd
just be emailing people.
That's right. Or there's always the young kid who's the tech wizard who you go and say, hey, can you find out for me? And he does. In the next chapter, you have all the information.
Sure.
That's also called lazy writing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking about every CSI episode where DNA results are available in 30 seconds.
Oh, yeah. That's right.
Is that something?
Just get a coffee. Come on back. I have in about 10 minutes.
Yeah. Does that change the expectations of your audience now? I mean, do people think they know more? Because this is apparently a thing that infects real trials.
Oh, it does, yeah.
Junk science and fiction have led people to expect.
Well, there are so many shortcuts in television storytelling, and it's not just that. I mean, every single legal case that would have taken 3 years to get through the courts managed to go through in a 40-minute episode of Good Wife and get resolved.
Sure, yeah.
They had a continuance in 10 minutes, and then they had all the detective found everything. Like, it was just, you just had to think, I just can't worry about that anymore because they can't tell a story in the logical sequence that real life happens. Mm-hmm. You just can't do it.
But if you're constructing text, if you're working in fiction as a novelist, does that change your relationship to it as well? Can you allow for the passage of time, or is it more important that stuff moves like a shot?
Well, you have to make some allowances and compromises. You have to think, I just have to bend the rules here because I want to be able to tell a story and do it to the point that you will accept it. I mean, and I'm going to bend a few rules. I'm going to cut a few corners. And as long as I don't do it too egregiously, I'm hoping you'll come along for the ride.
Right. Well, Hitchcock's argument was always that he didn't worry about the refrigerator question, right? The thing that people would watch a movie, go home, go to bed, get up in the middle of the night, go to the refrigerator to fix a snack and think, wait a second. That was his argument. If you thinking about it then, I did my job during the movie. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter. But I was trying to figure out if there are any refrigerator questions in Rear Window, and there really aren't. I mean,
I always get confused about the head in the garden at the end. Like, what? That part always, what the dog was digging at. That part I always have to sort of rewind and watch that again. It confuses me. And there's a scene in Vertigo that apparently is one of those, refrigerator at 3 a.m, and that's the scene where when he's following the woman and she goes into that house where she has rented a room. Right. And then he goes in afterwards and talks to the landlady. No, she wasn't here, and so forth. It doesn't make any sense, that scene, because she's not a ghost. Like, she doesn't go through walls, right. But he just somehow misses her. And that scene, I've watched it many times. I've gone online to sort of see what people are saying about it. And it's a scene that kind of doesn't make sense. It's a scene that Hitchcock just left in so that later you'd go, oh, wait a minute, what was that?
I always just assumed the landlady was in on it. That she was part of the insurance fraud.
No, I don't think that's it. Okay. I just don't think that's it. And you couldn't have a lady who committed insurance fraud go on and be on the Waltons. That was just fair. Wrong.
Yeah. It was a different time. But people, people knew what they had to do. They did. Yeah. You would forgive a lot, I think. But yeah, I don't know. The only thing in Rear Window that sticks out about the head is that if it's the head and not the saws, which is also speculated, whatever it is gone. It does explain why Thorwald doesn't flee right away, because he has to stay and take care of whatever that is. But then he also has to kill the dog, which if he's moved it, there's no reason to kill the dog.
Yeah, well, the reason to kill the dog would be that the dog will dig it up.
Right. But if he's already moved it, there's nothing there to dig up. But if you don't have him kill the dog, it doesn't establish threat. That's the moment. I mean, that's the moment where all the hostility coalesces, and we discover that he killed the dog because he's the only one who doesn't respond to.
He's the only one who doesn't go to the window.
To the shouting, yeah.
Yeah. So that little ember of the cigarette,
which is such a beautiful shot,
gorgeous scene,
and also gives Lisa's character the impetus to keep going. That's where she comes around.
And sometimes I don't know that except for the big major moving parts of a story. Sometimes I just don't feel that you have to resolve everything.
Right.
And I've done that in some of my books where I've left some sort of plot threads that are out there because they're not part of the main story. And some readers are like, well, what happened about so-and-so? Well, it's like real life. Some things don't get resolved.
Yeah.
Or he got away with it, or, we don't care about him anymore. And then, they're very upset. Yeah. We want everything. Sure. We want a nice little bow at the end, and every single plot thread is dealt with.
Yeah. Well, this is where you get these idea of plot holes that aren't actually plot holes, but that's what people call them because they're not satisfied. They want to know more, therefore the story failed them, which is not how that works. A friend of mine used to say, trust the film. If people ask questions while they were watching, if he was there, he would say, no, just you'll find out. Trust the film, it'll get there.
Yeah.
And the idea that it doesn't always get there is fine if it's not the A plot, if it's not the focus of the story.
It must have been on my 12th viewing of Vertigo. Mm-hmm. I suddenly went, who got him down from hanging off the eaves trough?
That's right. The first guy goes over.
He falls down and he's hanging there, and the other cop goes by and dies, and he's still there. What happened? How did he get down?
There were other cops.
That's right.
And that's fine. There were people behind the first guy. The most fit person made it up the stairs fastest and then died.
I know it doesn't matter, but it's funny how it just hit me one day. I went, wait a minute.
Yeah, and those things, again, like refrigerator questions, if they're bothering you that far in, then they can't have been that important. But the impulse of the brain to start picking apart things we already know and see it's the watchmaker's argument, right? How did this go here? How did that fit there? How did they get a car on the set to go back and forth? Is it the same cab every time? Did they repaint the numbers? Because it is, practicality becomes a thing, but it's also so purely entertaining. And
it's like if you've watched Bullet enough times, which I have far too many times, and if you watch The Chase enough times, you realize that there's a little green Volkswagen that shows up at least 20 times. They could have gotten a red Volkswagen to go. It's in there.
Now they're just digitally recolored.
That's right.
But yeah, in the olden days when you had to make the movie with the pieces you had in front of you, it's still kind of impressive to realize there's no digital effect at all in Rear Window to cover the skyline or the backdrops.
What a set that is. Yeah. What a set that is.
Doesn't look like a painting. I mean, that looks like a sunset, and then later it looks like a sunrise, and they just swapped it out, obviously.
But every time I look at it, and I look at all of the brickwork and the terraces and the windows, and that's a set.
Yeah, it took them months to build it.
Wow.
And apparently, again, I'm going by IMDb trivia, 8 apartments were fully furnished. The primary sets, any place you actually spend more than 2 minutes looking in,
were fully furnished.
Fully furnished. Costumes were there. Everything was, painted and papered to the characters everything was painted, papered, and dressed to suit the personality of the people. Miss Torso's space is very sparse because, supposedly, because she knocked stuff off. The character would have learned that if she put stuff on shelves, she would knock them off while she was practicing. And the choreography was all conceived of by the actor.
Really?
Hitchcock just let her do it. He said, just go to the music, do whatever you're doing.
I didn't know that.
And what was the other thing I didn't know? The mattress bit, the couple that's sleeping on the mattress. Supposedly Hitchcock told them, each actor, to pull the mattress in through a different direction. So they're fighting, and it's a real confused fight. And it was the only take. He didn't need to do it again.
Oh, I love that.
He just turned the water on and let them figure it out.
Oh, I love that. That's a fabulous detail.
Yeah, and it's the sense of real life in the characters whose lives we don't get to spend any time in.
Yeah.
We just watch them in these tiny little moments, as Jeff must.
Yes.
Whenever his attention is on them, our attention is on them.
But you're right, there are all these wonderful little vignettes like the newlyweds.
Yeah.
And, by day 2 or 3, how exhausted the man looks.
Mm-hmm. Which is kind of a sexist joke, but also kind of progressive. I have to admit. All the stuff that I thought would date hasn't dated. Or at least you can explore it from different directions. Like Lisa having more depth than Jeff expects is... it's a reversal of his sexist presumption that she's only interested in dresses and pretty clothes, and she's much smarter and more resilient and resourceful than he is. Mm. And we still get that little sting at the end where she puts away the big important book and pulls up,
whatever it is.
Bizarre.
I love that scene though. I love it.
And Grace Kelly sells it. She's she's able to show us that she has layers and multitudes and sides, and she just the fun she has with that accent, which I'm pretty sure is her own accent, but up about 10%. She's just a little more spoiled, a little more society.
Says, oh, you can see my apartment from here?
Yes, all the way up there on, was it 90?
Oh, yeah.
You just know she overlooks Central Park, and she comes for money and all that stuff. She brings lobster thermidor, which is the 50s cliche of a meal. Yeah. But it's such a perfect touch because she wouldn't see it as a cliche. She would see it as the best lobster thermidor. No, this is, they make fun of us because this is so good. This is the one you're supposed to have. Catered dinner from 21 in the tiffin boxes. It's such a... We know so much about her before she ever does anything.
Yeah.
And part of that is Grace Kelly, and part of that is the weird disdain that Jeff has in that monologue about her life. Mm-hmm. How she couldn't possibly appreciate what he does, but
in his way, he just sort of exasperatedly says of the dinner, "It's perfect."
Yeah, and it's sad for him.
Yeah,
and it doesn't make any sense to us. But I guess that's it, right? Because if you have Grace Kelly in your movie, you're going to have to find reasons for her not to be perfect.
Yeah.
I'd forgotten how few films she made and how much of an impression she made in them, and she's just wonderful.
Luminous.
Yeah.
Is she the one who's in Dialing for Murder? That's her.
Yeah.
I like that movie too.
And he used her. I mean, obviously Hitchcock in Blondes. He used her a few times in his films, but she's just. There's something about her, especially when she's playing the fashion plate, that nobody else has. She wears fashionable costumes consciously. She's performing in them. Yeah. It's as much of an armor as it is a wardrobe.
Another thing I like about Rear Window is I think we talked about plot holes. It has the plot. I think really does hold together. Unlike if you think very hard about Vertigo, it's ridiculous. Like there's so many loose ends. There's so many ways for it to go wrong. There's so many places where the plot could the subterfuge could have fallen apart.
Sure.
It just it's you can't think about it because it'll just completely unravel.
Mm-hmm. But the fever dream aspect is like enough to carry you through. You're lost in those velour drapes.
Another movie I think is a really overlooked movie that I absolutely love that is so Vertigo inspired is Obsession.
De Palma's film, which is coming back out on Blu-ray in North America. Finally,
I love that movie.
Shout Factory is releasing it in one of their Shout Select titles in March or April, I think.
I watched it again a couple months ago. I love that movie.
Yeah, me too. I found it on there's a UK edition that I picked up in Scotland. I found it in a used store in Aberdeen for like £8 and jumped on it.
Oh yeah.
To the point where I think I had to be pulled off the rack.
Oh, I love that movie.
It is such a weird. I mean, his Hitchcock riffs are so blatant that you, after a while, you just can't hold it against him anymore. Yeah. And what he does in Obsession is find that one nugget of something in Vertigo that no one had explored fully, that even Hitchcock didn't really find, and just push right into it. That overheated, agitated paranoia that comes with Obsession. And I don't know that Cliff Robertson has ever been better. He's fantastic in that.
He's just great in that. I love that movie.
And it's funny that the attempts to remake Rear Window have all had to disassociate so much. I mean, there was the Christopher Reeve TV movie, which...
I never saw that.
Yeah, it's pretty stunty. And it was made for television, and it feels like it. It just doesn't have the sprawl. There's Disturbia, of course.
I think I have seen that.
Yeah, it's not bad. It's a little too teenagey, hippie kind of thing. I mean, Fright Night sort of plays on it. There's a Mimic sequel that plays as a Rear Window knockoff.
And there's The Simpsons.
Yeah, Simpsons. Which in 22 minutes you can get away with it.
Yes.
It actually works. But the problem with all of the remakes has been, as far as best I can tell from having watched them all, is that you watch them and go, well, I could be watching Rear Window.
Why
investment
watch
of time.
This?
Yeah, this has been done perfectly. There's no new wrinkle you can bring to it. And now I suppose you could do something with surveillance cameras and monitors.
Well, that's kind of what I tried to do with my book Trust Your Eyes, was to bring an updated kind of version, something different to it.
But you're working in prose, you can get away with that. You're
Yeah.
not comparing camera shots and angles and performances. We're building that world instead. The logical question then is whether there's anything people should be looking for in Never Saw It Coming. Is there a Hitchcock route? I was trying to figure this out.
I think Never Saw It Coming was a fun book to write. I think if there's any sort of comparison, not really in plot, but I think that what I tried to do in that book is kind of always pull the rug out from under you, is that you think it's going this way and then it's not, and then you think it's going to go that way and then it's not. And there's always an opportunity for it to go wrong yet again. And so that's why it was a lot of fun to write that book, and it was a lot of fun to write the screenplay for it. And it's just always trying to, and of course when I did the first draft of the book, I didn't have a good ending on it. And then I saw a way to craft a better ending, which I don't want to kind of get into now because I want you to see it. But it's that where all these little pieces come together in a way that that Keisha Ceylon, played by Emily Hampshire, works something out. And so it was a lot of fun. So I think and I think that we are, as a viewer, even though she is not perhaps the best, the most noble character ever, we're with her.
Yeah.
Even when she does really bad things, we kind of like her.
Well, the beauty of cinema, right, is that whoever you start with is usually the person you empathize with the most. And Emily Hampshire is such I think she's just an incredibly present actor, so I'm always on her side no matter what she's doing. Even in 12 Monkeys, I kind of hoped she'd make it all work out for herself. But the fun thing about Never Saw It Coming as a movie is the constant sense of spiraling. Yeah, the idea that every new mistake is going to create 5 more mistakes.
Oh yeah, it's like that you just think things can't get worse, and now they're going to get worse.
Yeah, the domino effect.
And if you have a complete shit for brains boyfriend who you think is going to help you, he's not. And he's only going to make it worse and worse. And so you just keep thinking we're getting in deeper and we're not going to find a way out of this. And until you do.
Right.
And that's kind of true, I think, of any kind of good screenplay or book, is that you keep, torquing it up. And every time you give your hero a problem, you think, well, this can't get worse, and then it makes it worse. Just one more turn.
Yeah.
It's like turning that screw in as hard as you can.
Yeah.
And that was fun to do with that story.
Yeah. Whereas Rear Window is sort of the reverse, right? I mean, it's a streamlining of problems.
Yeah.
Because as we get closer to Thorwald, everything else kind of falls away.
Yeah.
And all the distractions, until they are distracting again, but the focus narrows and narrows. That beautiful shot of the telephoto lens, the first time we see it, this monster that he's pulled out.
Oh, it's where he sits it up like this.
Yeah, where there's effort. He's using his arm as a monopod, and he's focusing on it.
Well, and it's also, the real suspense in that movie is when the courtyard that we see from that Rear Window is like this huge canyon, and the suspense is, when will Thorwald make it to the other side? Mm-hmm. When will he cross that sort of threshold to get to the side where Jimmy Stewart is?
Right, because as long as Jim is in his apartment,
as long as he's there and he's over there,
protected,
we're fine. But then when we don't know where Thorwald is, and is it possible he's coming over, that's when it really gets hairy.
Mm-hmm. And again, 5 minutes before the ending. There's no time. It's just drawn out so long, and then everything literally speeds up because they're using that step frame effect to make people run a little faster through the courtyard. And
that looks so silly.
I assume people accepted it then.
It's hard to believe it ever didn't seem silly.
Yeah, and why isn't regular speed fast enough? You would think if it took a little longer, it would be more suspenseful.
Yeah, I don't get that.
I think it's just supposed to make us jolt in the sense that something is wrong. There's he tried tricks like that here and there, just to keep people.
And of course the only thing that really looks dated is when he falls.
Yeah,
that looks pretty.
Precious shot.
It looks a little bit. They did it better in Die Hard.
Sure. Well, I mean, it was a longer fall.
It was a longer fall.
I just watched that again with for Jeremy Lalonde's podcast, and
did that?
The story behind that. I mean, you know the story, right? They didn't tell Rickman when they were going to drop him.
Oh yeah.
They said they gave him a 20 count and they dropped him on 5, so it's real. Like his shock is genuine.
It is the best Christmas movie ever made.
I know. Trying to think if there's a Christmas connection to me. No, Rear Window. Rear Window is one of the best New York summer movies, even though it was shot in Los Angeles on a soundstage. You believe it?
Yeah.
That sweaty, sweltering sense where the rain. What is it? The rain just
7
makes the
Year
heat
Itch.
wet.
7 Year Itch is pretty. Do you know I have a friend?
Die Hard 3.
I have a friend. He reviews crime fiction, and he's wrote a huge biography of the crime novelist Ross Macdonald that I'm actually in because I knew him and so forth. And I go and see him when I'm in California. We'll meet for lunch, and I found out he was a child actor. That in the 7 Year Itch, the little kid that's put on the train with the mom to head out of town, that's him. Huh. And I said, "That's you." And so I watched it. I went, "My God!" I could even tell as soon as I saw it.
Why did he stop working?
I don't know. He even had this guy. His name is Tom Nolan. He even had his own TV show. I can't try to think of the name of it. It was like 1958. Went one season. He was this like 12-year-old kid in a western town and all his adventures. It was on NBC. Yeah, it was just. I mean, it has nothing to do with anything. It just sort of hit me that I was so surprised to find out that was him.
That is kind of amazing. Yeah. I didn't. You mentioned before we started recording that you'd seen Rear Window about 20 times. How often have you seen it theatrically? I was just kind of wondering how many times you've seen it big.
I have only seen Rear Window in a theater once.
The TIFF screening you mentioned?
TIFF did a screening of it 2-3 years ago, and I thought, I've got to go see that on a big screen. And it was interesting because on a big screen, you can really see the set.
Yeah.
And I saw things I had never seen before. And you're sitting in the theater, and you now have this immense canvas, and I was literally kind of pointing. Look, there's there's a dog or something there I had never noticed before, or there's that hose that's coiled up against the wall. These were little details that I'd never seen before.
Yeah.
So I've just seen it once in a theater.
Oh wow!
And it was wonderful. You know what's great about it was wonderful about TIFF is that I remember when I was a kid. My dad and I went to see 2001: A Space Odyssey at the theater in Lindsay, Ontario.
Okay.
And about 4 years ago, TIFF ran it as it was originally shown with the intermission and everything. And I took my son to see it, who at that time was like 29 or 30. And that was just such a great experience. But it was nice to see Rear Window. I'd love to see Vertigo at TIFF. I'm sure they've run it and will run it again.
Oh yeah, it'll be back.
It's neat to see things there. I wanted to go see Duel, Spielberg's TV movie there, which I just adore. They ran that there earlier, and I got sick. I wanted to go, and I ended up getting the norovirus.
Oh God.
Which is an excellent weight loss program if you're interested.
Had one once.
But it's wonderful seeing stuff that on a big screen that you have. I feel I feel a little sorry sometimes for our kids or who will never have the opportunity to see on a big screen for the first time Empire Strikes Back or Alien or Jaws or things, and they've grown up seeing them on video and have never had that astonishing experience of seeing it big.
Yeah, my own tick has been seeing Jaws theatrically as often as possible, because I grew up watching it on VHS, panned and scanned. Didn't see it in the theater until I was probably 19 or 20, and have seen it in 4 of the 5 screens at the Lightbox now, except the big one, except for Cinema 1. And it's killing me. It didn't play there during the Spielberg retrospective. It was in 2 and 3. And I was trying so hard.
And the other thing that's a joy is to have seen these movies before anybody knew what they were about.
Mm-hmm. That's something.
So, I mean, I saw Jaws when I was 17 or whatever it was, 18, the week it came out.
Mm-hmm.
And when that head shows up in the bottom of the boat, like, that audience went insane. And to experience that, you know, like, it's hard to have that collective experience now.
It is. And the idea, too, that that the film's reputation precedes itself. Yeah. That you know you're going to see one of the greatest movies ever made, and you will almost certainly be disappointed in that experience because of those expectations. Seeing Alien for the first time, the first week it was in the theater, I saw it at, the one on Bloor, the massive. Oh, the university.
On the university.
Oh,
saw
man.
There. When that chest burster scene happened, it was just, you weren't just doing this. It was just unbelievable experience.
Yeah. I saw it at the Uptown One at a midnight screening when they revived 70mm Midnights for a while, and that was fascinating because the audience did know it, and it still got them. It didn't matter because your experience in that theater, the big cavernous space of the Nostromo and the theater working in concert together, just so incredibly unsettling.
I remember being in the Uptown the week that Carrie came out, and
that would have played.
Knew nothing, and that scene at the end with the hand comes up, which is like 3 seconds from the end, and then the lights come up. You're like, what experience!
Yeah, that's cinema. I mean, we should probably see if we can get Rear Window back into theaters for a little while. This is the kind of thing we could set up with TIFF, I think. The new print. I mean, I was telling you this before we started recording as well. I looked up my interview. It turns out I interviewed Robert Harris when he did the restoration in 2000, when that started circulating. And the only thing that is applicable to the present day is that he wasn't happy with the home video version. The video transfers that they'd made were unsatisfying to him, and he was going to try to go back and do it. So I should find out if he did it for the Blu-ray, and I'll mention it on the outro. But hopefully he signed off, because the Blu-ray looks great.
Oh, I bet.
There's a really lovely box set. I'm sure they're still using the same masters, but there's one that came out about 4 years ago in the UK and in America with 14 or 15, depending on where you buy it. North by Northwest is or isn't part of the package, of Hitchcock's classics, the Masterpiece Collection, I think they called it. And the Rear Window disc is just sumptuous, just a beautiful Technicolor transfer. And I think it reflects the print that was released in 2000, which was, like the other bit of trivia I know, it was released in analog mono. They did not like Dolby Digital for the soundtrack. He wanted an analog experience to go out with it. Of course, now everything's DCPs. Oh, yeah. But there are probably still some 35mm prints of that floating around. I know there's still a 70mm print of Vertigo floating around from the 97 restoration. Wow. All right. I'll talk to Cameron. We can set something up.
Okay.
My thanks to Linwood Barclay, whose first film as a screenwriter, Never Saw It Coming, is now available on demand from iTunes and other services. You can also find his books, including his latest thriller, A Noise Downstairs, pretty much anywhere the written word is sold. Thanks as well to Linwood's wife Neetha, who was kind enough to sneak cookies in for us during the recording, and to Winnie Wong. She knows what she did. You can find Linwood on Twitter at Linwood_Barclay, and you can find Rear Window on Blu-ray and DVD from Universal Studios Home Entertainment, both on its own and in the box set that I mentioned. It's also available on iTunes and Google Play. Oh, and I looked into it, and Robert A. Harris was not involved in the mastering of the Blu-ray. It still looks pretty good, though. As always, you can find me on Twitter at Norm Wilner and elsewhere on the internet at nowtoronto.com. You can also find this podcast on Twitter at SEMcast, SEMcast, and on the web at someoneelsesmovie.com. If you feel like leaving a review on iTunes or Apple Podcasts or wherever you enjoy the show, that would be greatly appreciated. Every little bit helps, it truly does. Thanks for your support, and thanks for listening.